Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we're going to be continuing our Space Marine videos by going and having a look at the Space Marine specialists within a Space Marine's army. Now, these are slightly different from the specialist units that I mentioned previously. These specialists are actually specialist Marines themselves, who have specific powers and skills that are very useful within the Space Marines chapter, and are used to unique effect upon the battlefield and off the battlefield. Now, the four different specialisations that I'll be dealing with today are the Apothecary, the Chaplains, the Librarians, and the Techmarines, all of which have their unique roles and all of which need a little bit of explanation so that people know the differences between some of these roles. Now, I'll first start talking about the Apothecaries. Now, they are the Space Marines with the greatest medical training. Now, obviously, a Space Marine... Now, as I've mentioned previously, Space Marine physiology is very different from that of a standard human, and so a Space Marine Apothecary must be trained specifically in how to deal with the numerous injuries that can be suffered by a Space Marine, and how they can be treated in combat conditions. Not only are they field medics, so will take to the battlefield and help Space Marines who are wounded, they are also biological researchers, and many of their findings have actually helped in dealing with many xeno races such as the Orcs and the Tyranids. Now, the primary responsibility of a Space Marine Apothecary is to deal with the chapter's gene seed. Now, as mentioned in my specific Space Marine biology video, the chapter's gene seed is what creates a Space Marine from a standard human. The responsibility of this item is entrusted only to the Apothecaries to make sure that the Space Marines continue their bloodline. It is also their task to monitor the purity of the Space Marine's gene seed, to ensure that no mutations are occurring, and to ensure that they do not become corrupted by chaos. Now, it is also the Space Marine Apothecary's duty to harvest the gene seed from their fallen brothers, and this will be used using the Carnifex, which is attached to their Narthicum, which is the medical device they usually have on the exterior of their armour, which will allow the Space Marine Apothecary to cut through the brothers' armour and through their toughened exterior to get at the organs they require to help continue their chapter's line. Now, the heraldry of their armour is quite basic. Basically, almost every apothecary has pure white armour, with their chapter symbol on their left-hand shoulder pad, and on their right-hand shoulder pad having the prime helix, which is a red intercrossing helix symbol, which indicates that they are an apothecary within their chapter, just in case they ever are seconded to other chapters who require their aid. Now, there are variations in different chapters. The Blood Angels have the Sanguinary Priests, and the Space Wolves have the Wolf Priests, all of which take care of some of this function. However, of course, there are variations which are mentioned more in their own chapter videos. Moving on from the Apothecary, I now want to talk about the Techmarines. Now, the Techmarines are, as they say on the tin, the technicians and the mechanics of a Space Marine chapter. They will maintain the war gear of every single individual Space Marine, above what would usually be required by the Space Marines themselves, and will also take care of the vehicles, the maintenance of the starships, and many of the other tasks that only a Space Marine Techmarine would have the knowledge to deal with. They are chosen early in their training to be identified as potential recruits for the Techmarine role. They will then be sent to Mars for a 30-year training course in how to deal with the different technical issues that can arise, and be indoctrinated into the machine cult, which in fact holds their strongest allegiance next to that of their chapter. So of course it is their chapter, the machine cult, and then anything else in the Imperium, meaning that they have a rather unique perspective compared to other Space Marines. Now, of course, they tend to follow the other tenets of the Mechanicus by replacing many parts of their body with mechanical implants, and most noticeably this will usually be through mechadendrites, i.e. large mechanical arms that come out of their back, usually attached via a servo harness, which will allow them to use many different tools and manipulators when on the battlefield without having to lug around huge toolboxes full of equipment. Now, the next speciality I'm going to mention are the Chaplains, and this is one of the most diverse of the roles within the Space Marine chapters, as virtually every chapter has a slight variation on their chapter cult. Now, I'm not going to mention every variation in the Space Marine chapters, as that will be dealt with in their own videos. However, what I will say is that every chapter cult is different. This all stems from the fact that their beliefs actually predate the Ecclesiarchy, who is the main religious body in the Imperium. This means their cults tend to revolve more around their Primarchs than the Emperor himself, although they still revere him as a very high power, although not all of them revere him as a god, based on the fact that they know they come from him genetically, meaning there is a little bit of tension between the Ecclesiarchy ecclesiarchy and the cults of the Space Marines because of their differing opinions. Now, because of their responsibilities, the chaplains will usually administer the spiritual health of the chapter. Now, chaplains have quite distinct war gear, and it's usually painted entirely in black, unlike the Apothecary's white. They will have their chapter symbol again on the left-hand side, and will also have helmets, which are shaped like skulls. And the extent of this shape can vary. It could only be the faceplate, which is shaped like a skull, or the entire helmet could actually be modelled after a gigantic human skull. Now, these are used to inspire fear in the enemy and show their devotion to the cult of the Emperor, which of course does venerate skulls and other sort of Gothic icons as icons of the Emperor. Then they also have on their persons a rosarius, which is in fact a small pendant or item which is used as a devotional piece given to them by the ecclesiarchy. Now, these devices also actually have shielding inside them, which allows them to project an energy field which can protect a chaplain against very strong attacks that even their power armor may not be able to resist. Now, this is of course a very unique gift, and is given to the highest members of the chaplain organisation within the Space Marines, although the number of chaplains in some chapters are so few that of course all of them are equipped with rosariuses. Now, also, as I've mentioned before, a chaplain will also have a Crosarius Arcanium, which is a staff or mace with a specific shape on top of it. Now, detail on this weapon is actually in my Space Marine Armory video, so you can go and have a look at those. However, the actual item is used as a power weapon and helps the chaplain smite the enemies of the Emperor. Now, it must be noted that this is of course distinct from a Rosarius, as many people get these two items confused because of course they're not very... But I will make it clear that a Rosarius is not a Crosarius. Hope that helps. Anyway, that's the chaplains, and of course I will mention them more on their specific chapter cults in the chapter videos, so look out for that later on. Now, finally, I want to talk about Space Marine Librarians. Now, these are one of the more contentious Space Marines in a Space Marines chapter, because of course they use the powers of the warp. Now, as I've previously mentioned, the warp is a corrupting influence on many people, and so Space Marine Librarians are some of the strongest willed Space Marines in the Imperium, and some of the most powerful psychers as well. Now, these psychers wield their powerful abilities on the battlefield, used to help defend against other psychers and attack those with great power, as the Space Marines are not beyond using any resource in order to win combat. The Librarians are of course dedicated to their chapter, however they are viewed with distrust by many as they are technically mutants, utilising psychic powers in order to achieve victory, and of course as psychic powers are seen as corrupting, many Space Marines, especially those among the Black Templars, view psychers as something that should not be allowed, and some chapters actually ban psychers from being part of their recruitment, just removing psychers entirely and having them sent away. Now, Space Marine Librarians actually have several different ranks depending on their strength. Now, they start as a Lexicanum, and then move up to a Codicea, and move up to an Epistolary, which are eventually leading to the rank of Chief Librarian. Now, Space Marine Librarians are easily identifiable by their blue armour, which is universal amongst any librarian. They also have their chapter symbol on the left-hand side, as we've mentioned with the other specialities, but they also have a psychic hood, which is a large metallic device which can be seen, which encompasses the head, although it doesn't enclose it entirely, and is usually lined with crystals and other psychic reactive elements, which allow them to boost and amplify their psychic powers, whilst at the same time defending them against possible attack by psychic entities such as demons or other warp entities. Now, these psychic hoods are quite prominent, but also they usually wield psychic weaponry, such as force weaponry. Now, force weaponry, as I've mentioned in my armory, although probably not in great detail, is weaponry that is actually psychically reactive and channels the power of a psyker, enabling them to strike the enemies with greater power than they would be able to with just a standard weapon, giving them quite a large combat advantage, which does tend to offset the fact that they're great distrust by other members of their own chapter. Now, that's everything I wanted to talk about in relation to the specialist Marines within a Space Marine organisation. Now, we've talked about that now, so we've come almost to the end of our Space Marine videos, which is a very sad day. I'm sure you're all very tearful. So what's going to happen now is that we're going to concentrate on rounding up a few more facts that I may have missed, and we're also going to go in and start talking more about the Space Marine chapters. My aim is to finish off the majority of the chapters before we move on to the next topic of discussion, which at this stage is still looking like the Imperial Guard, so if you have any different preferences, let us know. As I've said before, if you do have a Space Marine chapter you would like to see come first, I think it's currently the Grey Knights that are ahead. It's anybody's game at this stage, so do vote below if you do want a specific chapter, and if you have any more questions or anything else, don't forget to either send me a message or ask in the comments below. That's everything I wanted to mention today. See you next time on the Vaults of Terra.